Welcome fellow Wargamers, my name's The Sentinel, welcome back to another video from across the tabletop. It's been a few weeks since I uploaded a video, apologies, I've been busy. We've just had permission to go ahead and build a shed in my back garden, which will allow us to make a small studio for recording and battle reports and things like that. So I've been moving forward with that. Hopefully that will be up and running by the end of August, and we'll start recording more after that sort of point, once that's up and running. The groundwork has been done, we're just waiting for the delivery of the shed now, so it's fantastic news. So apologies for not having a couple of videos up. Hopefully that will get back into motion until the shed turns up, and then I focus on building it. So what I wanted to go over is I spoke a few weeks ago that I was going to an RTT at a weekend, and it was the one down in Poole. The name of the tournament eludes me at the moment, but it was a fantastic tournament. I turned up with the list in front of me, minus some servitors that I just couldn't find at the moment. So it was a 4-man servitors plus what you see. So it was the 3 relic contemptors, the 2 suppressor units, a eliminator unit with their las fusils, a eradicator unit with the heavy melter rifles, 2 units of 5 assault intercessors, and then an intercessor unit of 10 with assault bolters. I also had 3 heavy weapon attack bikes with the multi-melters, and for my HQs I had a tech marine, a chapter master and a lieutenant, also with a relic banner as well. I've explained what the idea of the army was in a previous video, so go and please check that out if you're interested in why I took the units and how. I didn't do too bad in my opinion. I went for a 1 win out of the day in my mind. I would have liked to have done more. There was a few mistakes on my behalf with deployment and how I was utilising the units to affect the game. So I was informed that I'd be playing, of course, with the BCP app. It was put out that I'd be playing Drukhari first game. So I was very nervous. Never played Drukhari before, so it was the first RTT, first game, going back into tournament scene, and it was up against Drukhari. The standard layout of the Drukhari, he had 4 raiders and 2 venoms, which were all kitted out with the usual Slith and Nurgle and racks with witches, with the incubi, and the standard stuff that you'd expect really from the Drukhari at the moment in the meta. I went first. Line of sight was very difficult. He played extremely well. I took first turn. I took the table edge that I wanted. I deployed extremely reserved just in case he took first turn and he was able to maneuver. We were playing retrieval mission, so mission number 11 from the 2021 Grand Tournament book. So it all favoured in my mind, in my side of the board, because it was further away distance. I deployed a bit heavier in my deployment zone, trying to slow the gap down between us so I have more light range on him. But due to the fact that the terrain was, I would say, a little bit heavier than I was expecting, line of sight was very difficult. I virtually, because I deployed quite reserved, even if I moved out and was able to, even if I moved out of where I'd positioned my models, I still couldn't get line of sight of any of his raiders or venoms. So unfortunately, I didn't fire 1 single round in my turn. I moved out some attack bikes onto an objective, tried to advance onto the second objective on my side of the table board. Unfortunately, my advance roll didn't go to my liking and was unable to get there. So at the end of my turn 1, I was holding 2 objectives. I mean, in all the grand scheme of it, 10 points in the first round is probably what I would be looking at anyway. So I wasn't too upset about that going into turn 2. He then moved out his venoms, took some pot shots at my attack bikes, and killed one of my attack bikes. It was one of those things that I was quite happy with, that he wasn't able to kill my attack bikes outright, which was great. I was able then to get line of sight on the 2 venoms that he pushed onto the 2 objectives in his half, killed both of those with the contemptors and the melters from the attack bike that was left. But the way the train was worked, once he deployed his racks from the raiders, I couldn't see him again. So my 2 targets were the 2 venoms. So again, little shooting, and the game was going more his way than mine, dictating with the train that we're on. It was the best that I could do at the time. So thinking back, I probably would have gone with more deep striking units, reserve units, to be able to move up the board more comfortably and get the line of sight and the shooting that I wanted. So he was able to score primary far more comfortable than myself, due to the fact that I knew how, from a raider on his deployment zone, he could move 20 inches and then assault me, with all his witches and things like that. So I was trying to stay out that 20-inch range of, 27-inch range of threat range in turn 3. He was able to make an astounding assault with some witches and racks and Sliff and Nurgle, all going off at the same time. So pinned me right back into my deployment zone. I did clear them off, but not fast enough. So it took me a turn just to get rid of them all, but that meant that I wasn't holding the objective in my command phase, so I lacked in the primaries. So essentially, I lost the game. I was quite, disappointed in my performance, but I did get a 64 points against 80 points. So, in my opinion, my first game against Drukhari, excuse me, first game against Drukhari, getting 60 points from them with an Imperial Fist list with 0 line of sight on turn 1 and having not shot anything, and killing 2 things in turn 2, I was quite happy with. So moving on from there, I went on to play my second game against Dark Angels. Again, this would be a first for me, not playing Dark Angels before. He was running 20 Terminators. He was running 3 units of attack bikes with the multi-melters, 2 in each, a Blade Guard veteran unit, a Ancient on bike, a Talon Master, a Chapter Master. Oh, sorry, not a Chapter Master. He was playing Azrael and a Chaplain with a jump pack. And a few other niggly units, I believe. Again, I won deployment, and again I won. I got second turn this time though, and he was able to get off his psychic powers that he wanted, position his units where I couldn't be seen, and he did really well. He reserved his attack bikes until I'd made my move with my contemptors. But again, it was very limited line of sight, which you'd expect at those sort of high level games, that there would be an element of hiding and waiting for your opportunity to priority target. He did really well. Can't take anything away from him. I was a little bit frustrated with the contemptors in this game. They didn't perform as highly as I was expecting. But the fact that he's transhuman on all of his first company essentially made it very difficult for a strength 6 weapon or strength 7 weapon to do virtually any damage. I just wasn't wounded enough, which is acceptable on his part. He played really well. I was able, when he deep striked his Terminators in, we were playing mission, my apologies, we played mission, I want to say Surround and Destroy. So the 2 objectives in the middle, and then the 2 objectives in each deployment zone. So 6 in total, hold 1, hold 2, hold more. Again, I did quite well on the primaries in this game, but not so well on my secondaries. I don't know what I was doing when I took the secondaries for this. I really didn't take the ones I was expecting to produce anything on my behalf. So primary I did well, secondary I did really well really poorly on this, and it ended up being 55 to me, 92 to the Dark Angels guy. He actually performed much better than the Drukhari guy against me, and it was just my part not focus firing on his Terminators when I had the chance, and I was I pushed too late to the centre of objectives, so primary was behind me. I only got, I think, at the end of the game, I think I scored 35 on primaries, due to letting him manoeuvre around me in a direction I shouldn't have really. But it was a good game. He played really well. Couldn't take anything away from him. It's probably, when I say that, I mean, the faults lie in my behalf as a player, not my opponent's. If I lose, it's because my opponent absolutely outplayed me. And I'm not going to take anything away from their army and their performance. If I lose, it's my fault, not theirs. And it's not dice rolls, that's for sure. Underperformance of the contemptors is going to happen. I should have really, it's going to happen at least once every 6 or 7 games. And when I say underperformance, it means that I'm not rolling any 6s for my mortal wounds. And in one round, not one mortal wound was caused by 3 of them. So, when you're thinking about Terminators that I've fought 3 wounds and you're not making any mortal wounds to convert, that's what I mean about not performance. But again, it's going to happen. It's a dice game, so move on and stop crying, in my opinion. From myself, I kept telling myself stop crying. So I moved on to my 3rd game, and of course I hadn't won any games throughout the day, so I was feeling a bit low. I was paired up with a Necrons player who also hadn't won any games that day, and he was playing quite an aggressive Necron army, 3 units of 10-man warriors with the assault assault weapon system that he has, so quite dangerous once he gets in range. I had outranged him. I won deployment zone and the dice to go first. He deployed extremely aggressively with his 3 warriors on the line. His choppy boys, as we call them, are back in our end. When I say choppy boys, I mean he had a unit of Lich Guard and a unit of those Necrons with the big swords and spider bodies. Why can't I remember what they're called now? My apologies, guys. A couple of warriors, no Catan though, so I was very comfortable in going into this with no Catan, being able to deal with his army in my shooting ability and assault ability. So once he deployed on the line, pretty much with all of his army, I got the first turn, I was able to bear down every single weapon system that I had in my arsenal, and virtually took at least 30 to 40% of his army away in turn 1, which looking back was really devastating for the young man that was playing the Necrons army. We were playing battle lines, so this one only had 4 objectives, one in each deployment zone and 2 in the centre. I was able to move on to the one on the right hand side of my opponent on the table and hold 2 objectives in turn 1. I tried to make a move onto the opposite side to try and score primary for 15, but I honestly thought that by turn 4 I'd have 45 on primary as long as I could hold 2 throughout the game anyway. So I wasn't worried about losing one flank. I had put very little amount of units on one side to try and concentrate my firepower on the other side of the board. It was a large piece of terrain in the middle, so it made you want to go down one side of the board to the other. So I tried to overload one side more than the other, but still keep a threat. So I had 1 Contemptor, my Eliminators and my Eradicators on one side, and then every single other unit I had on the other side. I put my 2 Suppressors in Deep Strike for behind enemy lines. After he explained to me his army and what it does, he wants to come forward. That should have left space for me then to drop 6 men at the back wherever I wanted for behind enemy lines, and it worked. I got them in turn 2 and they stayed in his deployment zone for the whole game, winning me 15 on primary for behind enemy lines. This was my best win on secondaries and primaries. I actually scored 100 points on this game and he only scored 40. So I thought I did really well. Looking back on the results of the where I phased and where I was placed within the tournament itself, I came 16th out of 30, which it's pretty good for an Imperial Fist player. That doesn't do very many tournaments, but he's trying to come up there with the best. There was Stephen Vox from Vanguard Tactics there, who won the tournament with his sisters, which was an amazing achievement with sisters. But coming back to the Imperial Fist, I thought they did really well. They do extremely well against, in my opinion, to the Xenos factions. Once the terrain is not so heavy, for instance, for the Dark Angels, the Dark Eldar. Space Marines they do pretty well against. I found that they are far more difficult to beat than just the standard Marines, but that's expected. They're Marines and they are always difficult to beat. But the Necron, if he had a Catan, it would have been a completely different game. If he didn't run the assault weapon systems on his Necron warriors, maybe a different game. Yeah, maybe if he took Immortals for the toughness 5, that changes the way the list performs. You know, I've fired 70 odd shots into a 10-man Immortals unit twice and only did 1 wound. So, you know, yeah, it makes a difference to toughness 5 against my army. But I was quite happy with the performance. I had a look through. I was the only player of the tournament to score 100 points. So I was quite thrilled about that. When I look back, 30 players, 90 games. You know, is that right? 30 players, 3 games. Yeah, 90 games, and I was the only one to score 100. So I was quite pleased with that. That was an achievement on its own. So I'll take that away, put it in the bank, and hopefully move on from there. So that was my tournament at the RTT a couple of weeks ago. I was invited to another RTT by a local friend of mine that was running one, and this was at Twisted Dice. So this is Leighton Buzzard, Twisted Dice. It was a fantastic venue in the Legion in Leighton Buzzard. And I was thrilled to have an invitation due to the fact that they were planning a 2-day event. They had some issues with the venue due to COVID, so they had to drop it down to a 1-day event, and that changed the dynamic of who wanted to attend. So a spot came available, and he asked me if I wanted to jump in, and I said yes. So it was fantastic. Another chance to take the Imperial Fists to a tournament and perform. I was expecting. So after looking at my list that I took to the pool tournament, I decided to change it up a little bit, and I dropped an attack bike, and I dropped a 5-man intercessor unit, and the servitors that aren't here, and I was able to squeeze in, once I dropped some additional weapon systems, another 10-man intercessor unit with assault bolters. Now you might be thinking, why did I do this? I found my 10-man intercessor unit is perfect. Yeah, it worked really well in all 3 games in the previous tournament, and I really enjoyed playing with them. Yeah, the amount of shots that they get is just phenomenal. And I really enjoyed just having the flexibility of being able to put 30 shots of assault bolters down. And the other one is I knew I'd be going up against AdMech. The scene up there has a lot of AdMech players and quite a few Death Guard players. So after seeing how they performed against the Dark Angels at toughness 5, doing toughness 4 but only wounding on 4s, I thought, well, if I ever face a Death Guard army, I think I'll probably just need a few more bolt shots to be able to knock off those 1 wound, 2 wounds here. I think that I did pretty well. So that was my army that I took. No changes to my HQ elements and the Warlord traits I took for them. No change to the Contemptors, and that was pretty much it. The plan was to try and utilise the 2 10-man intercessor units and perform with those with the number of shots. Now this was a little bit different to the pool one. They had a few more restrictions on, so we were playing in pools. So there was 6 guys in one pool, and we'd play each other until 3 games, and then we'd work out the best score between the pods that they were running, which meant that the Swiss pairing wasn't as well. There was no Swiss pairing. Essentially, it was Swiss pairing within the pods, which meant that if you won 2 games out your pod, you didn't necessarily mean you were playing the best player in the pod, because you'd probably just beaten the 2 best players, which was fine by me. I was happy with the way they were doing it. They were putting on a tournament. I was invited to it, so why complain? I got to play some Warhammer for a day, for 3 games, which was fantastic. So we'll go out. So I got the pairing again, just like the previous RTT. We got heads up who we were playing first a night before, and I'd been given Death Guard, so I was expecting to play Death Guard throughout at least 1 game throughout the tournament. So I got my head together, had a look at his list, worked out what his most deadliest things was, which were the Plague Burst Crawlers, in my opinion, with the mortars. But he was also running 2 Relic Contemptors with the Volkite, but no missiles, and 2 of those silly little vehicles with the melters and the missiles and the flamers on, which are horrible in my opinion, with their movement and shooting. So I was quite was quite impressed with the amount of firepower that the Death Guard player had. He had 3 units of Death Shroud Knight Terminators. I think they're called the Death Shroud Terminators, which are the ones with the scythe weapon systems that Death normally carries, and 50 Poxwalkers with his Malignant Plague Classers, Talisman, and other psychic traits from Warlords and things like that, and elites. So I knew I was going up against a very tough army. I knew that I was going to be struggling to kill the army itself. So when I went to sleep that night, I thought of some of the strategies that I wanted to take. I wanted to take Oath of Moment, because if I didn't kill the vehicles, that I wasn't going to win. I'd faced a Death Guard army the week before and went up against through a local community game, and the death crawlers with the mortars are just absolutely terrifying, especially against my infantry that are holding an objective at the back. So I knew that they were my priority targets, and to try and ignore the Contemptors as much as possible. And I know that sounds a bit silly, but when I saw my potential with my Contemptors, it takes 3 Contemptors to realistically kill a 10-man Intercessor unit, with 2 up armor save in cover. So I wasn't overly scared with the Contemptors. I was more scared of the Plague Burst Crawlers, with those entropy cannons just ripping straight through and killing my Contemptors before I had a chance to fight back. So I turned up at the table, took Oath of Moment. I took behind enemy lines again, quite like that. If his army doesn't move forward, then I pin him in the back, and I can score the primary and maybe score a couple of points on that. I was thinking 6 to 8 points on behind enemy lines. I took Oath of Moment, thinking again 10 for that one. I wasn't thinking I was going to get 100. I was thinking more around the 60 to 70 point mark, and just hopefully outplay him on primaries and win the game. I put the third one I took was, I can't remember now. My apologies. I took a third, a secondary, and I can't remember what it was. So it worked out there. I mean, I was looking at 8 across the board for all my primaries. That's what I was aiming for, and it's not a high score, but that's quite a low score in secondaries. And I achieved all my secondary goals with a little bit more, which was fantastic. There were some pinnacle errors within my judgment, and some amazing calls to be made. I personally won the first turn. I won the deployment zone. I picked my deployment zone. I then put in, this will shock you a little bit, I put a 10-man Intercessor unit in reserve and my heavy Eradicators. I knew that his Blade Purse Crawlers were going to be sat at the back. His Contemptors have the range, they can sit at the back, and this missile, the little crawler thing with the multi-melter and missile launcher, was going to sit at the back. He'd also taken While We Stand, We Fight to the last, which were these 2 Blade Purse Crawlers and these missile melter guys, which I thought, well, if I can't get to them, then I won't be able to kill them. And once he kills out my long-range suppressor units and my eliminators, I don't really have enough maneuverability to get line of sight on them and to kill them. So my intention was to stick a 10-man Intercessor unit and my Eradicators to overwhelm one side and just focus fire one of the Plague Burst Crawlers down in turn 2. That was my intention. Yeah, and it worked. So first turn, I take first turn, my eliminators come out, my suppressor that was on the table, and 1 unit of suppressors in deep strike. We're able to take a Plague Burst Crawler down to 1 wound with all their shooting. It makes massive amounts of difference, because they're -1 damage to every single weapon. So first round I was getting the +1 damage to vehicles, but he was minusing the 1 damage. But it was enough just to put him down to his bottom bracket, which was amazing. It made that Plague Burst Crawler less efficient, and I was effectively just taking minimal damage from 1. He saw how quite aggressive I was playing, so he held back in his turn 1 and didn't push out as hard as I thought he was going to do with his Poxwalkers and these Terminators. He put 2 units of his Destral Terminators in deep strike, so I had to make sure that I had secured at least one of my flanks and tried to put him in a position where either he deploys in front of my army or he deploys in one of the corners, and then I can just move away from his Terminators once he deploys them. that was my sort of logic, and it played to that exact nature. He deployed both units in the bottom corner where he could try and make an assault onto one of my objectives, which I expected, but I was able to put a position where I could take the objective back with enough contemptor shots and enough units charging in to take it back. But he failed both of his charges, so that meant that he had 6 of really expensive Terminators that could only move 5, could only charge 12, and I had units that could move 6 and advance and still shoot, with a Contemptor moving 8 and just stay out of his range. And that's exactly what I did, which was fantastic. My Intercessors and my Eradicators came on turn 2 as well, and they did what they were supposed to do, focus fire the other Blade Curse Crawler down. So I took his Blade Curse Crawler, one mortar guy tank out with my Eradicators and Assault Intercessors. I had 4 wounds left on him after my Eradicators, and he made a couple of invulnerable saves, which was, dice rolls, so amazing for him. 4 wounds left, my Assault Intercessors popped off. I used the Tank Hunter strategy, so instead of winning on 6s, I was winning on 5s. I made 4 or 5 rolls on the wounds for 5s, so it worked. And he failed his armor saves, and I was able to take it down with bolter fire. The other one that was on 1 wound, a suppressor unit dropped in from deep strike and was able to take that one out on line of sight, which was amazing. So I'd taken out the 2 biggest threats in my opinion. I'd pinned him into his deployment zone. I'd ran away from his Terminators from deep strike after he failed his charges with them, even with a reroll. So that was 3 failed charges essentially. It changed the game, flipped it on its end, and I was able to scrape a win at 80-70. Thoroughly thrilled with that, result. Again, scoring my secondaries to my mind what I wanted, which was 8s across the board, and I scored a 6 on behind enemy lines. I scored a 12 on, to Oath of Moments, and I scored 10 on something else that for some reason it eludes me what the 3rd secondary I took. And I was thrilled. So my first win of the tournament, of the day, of the RTT and Twisted Dice, up on a high, and I was paired in my pod with an Imperial Fist, Imperial Guard army that had 3 armigers. So he was running 2 Manticores, 3 armigers, 2 company commanders with the Demolisher, and he was running 3 Chimeras with infantry, with like 6 infantry units, a heavy weapon team. I felt quite confident. I played a lot of guard units, and I thought, if I can do quite well here. I put my Intercessors again and my Eradicators in deep strike, and I put a suppressor unit in reserve, and then deep strike my suppressor unit 1. I took first turn. I killed a commander, a battle tank. So I killed a company commander battle tank, a Chimera, a Manticore, and 1 armiger. Yeah, 1 armiger, so leaving 2 armigers on the table. So I personally thought, this is it. I've took most of his firepower off him. I took his mobility away from him. I was quite thrilled with that. He then pushed out with his 15-inch move on his armigers. I was, not that I should have been shocked. I asked how far they moved, but 15 inches from your deployment zone into your enemy's deployment zone, deployment side of the board, is quite scary. I couldn't. It's not that I couldn't believe, but I was quite taken back with the speed of the armigers. Really, he was running a chainsword with multi-melters and then a melter gun on top as well. So I couldn't really expect much to survive once they started shooting and charging. So I expected my losses to be quite bad when the armigers came in first turn. I was able to kill. He did some significant damage, but I weathered the storm. So my turn 2, I deployed my Intercessors on the right flank, my Eradicators on my own deployment zone to take out the armiger that had come into my my table edge and killed my attack bikes. Fair one for him. And I did pretty well. I was taken out. I took another armiger out. I took his back tank commander down to 2 wounds left. I took another Chimera out. I wasn't able to get to his second Manticore that he had in the corner. It was just out of line of sight, and I didn't have enough movement on it. He did really well at screening me out on one side of the board and locked up my eliminators, so they weren't able to pinch the objective at the back of his on the back left. We were playing Scorched Earth again on this one. Oh, Surround and Destroy, sorry. So it was Surround and Destroy again, and I just couldn't get to his back left deployment zone, unfortunately. And it's just the way it goes sometimes. He played really well. He was a fantastic opponent. I forgot to bring down my suppressors that were in deep strike in turn 2. I brought them down in turn 3. I didn't put them in the position where I should have, so they weren't effective. And the fact that they didn't fire at all because I put them in the wrong position, which could have changed the game a little bit. It ended up after we talked turn 5 out, and we did some rolling to make sure that the advance rolls for his infantry units that were still on the board, with his commanders giving him move, move, move. He won by 1 point. It was 81 to 82. There were a few elements within the game where if I'd had deployed my suppressors in the right place and got some shots off, I could have stopped the 5-point swing, and I would have won that by a few points on my side. But that's a learning curve on my behalf. I should be more aware of the situation of the point tracking system. Going second, knowing that he had move, 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 he could pretty much take primary off me quite quickly, and not being able to see that in advance fast enough left me losing that game. So 1 win, 1 draw. 1 win, 1 loss. Going into my third game, I had an AdMech player in my pod. I was hoping to play a Tyranid player that was in the pod, just because we'd spoken earlier and we really wanted to have a matchup together at lunch. And unfortunately, I got the AdMech player. I say unfortunately, I played an AdMech army previously just to try and get the gist of how the army plays. And I was feeling quite confident, especially if I went first. And we both said at the table when we were rolling off, this could either be over in turn 1. I really need to go first, both of us said, just purely because of the firepower we both have. And it swung on that, really. So he rolled. I won the deployment zone, picked my deployment zone. He rolled for... but in this game, I didn't put my suppressors or eradicators in reserve. I had everything on the table. I probably should have, looking back at the game, gone with the strategy I was playing all tournament, which was to stick 1 suppressor unit in deep strike, 1 of my intercessors in reserve with my eradicators. Give me more board control to get to the... Because I do struggle to move up the board. It's not a fast army in that sense to get across the board. And having a unit that comes in at the side of the board, which is 12 to 9 inches away from your enemy deployment zone, makes a massive difference for Imperial Fists. And especially having those eradicators coming on the table where you need them to hit a heavy target is massive. So I had everything on the table. He had 2 bombers and an attack plane, essentially with Doomstriders, the 2 Vanguard units, our 20 guys, some chicken walkers, the dogs that he had, like a 10-man unit of dogs, and the flamer guys that do those mortal wounds that had just been FAQ'd to do maximum 6. So he had the mobility, he had the movement, he had the resilience that I was a little bit wary of. He took first turn, unfortunately. 2 bombers came over, bombed one of my contemptors down to 5 wounds, and then his flyer came over with the las cannon array, essentially, and killed one of my contemptors. He teleported one of the units that he can do with a marshal onto onto a line of fire that he had, onto my suppressors that I deployed in a building, and so my 10-man intercessor unit. I was quite surprised with the amount of stacks that one unit can take. I mean, he put like 4 or 5 tokens on this unit that all of his buffs that had gone off. And he was able to kill 5 of my intercessors and 4 of my suppressors out of the 3 units. I was happy that he hadn't wiped everything out, but because he'd killed suppressors and intercessors, I had the banner nearby and was able to take his flyer down to a few wounds with shooting back. So I was quite happy with that. I didn't have to worry too much about putting too much firepower into his flyer when it came to my turn, because I'd done it in his turn with the shooting back with the banner. I was quite thrilled with that. Moving on to my turn then, that was pretty much it. He didn't really affect much of the game because I hid quite well. So his primary target was to put 80 odd shots into 10-man intercessor unit and my 6 suppressors, and he nearly killed everything. I put pain is a lesson, smoke screen on one of the suppressors, reducing the amount of shots and keeping them alive, and that does work. It helped quite a lot. I kept 3 or 4 main intercessors alive with the 6s I rolled, and with smoke screen it just reduced the amount of attacks coming in, which was huge when he's rolling 40 odd dice. So I did quite well on my return. On my turn 1, I killed 19 out of the 20-man unit of 18 out of the 20-man unit. He failed his morale, but he didn't roll a 1 or 2, so 1 guy survived out of the 20-man unit. I can't say much more about that. It was, I did pretty well in my opinion. He was very shocked considering he had transhuman on it, +2 to his armor save, ignoring my AP1. My contemptors really worked hard at that. I had 2 contemptors firing at that unit, intercessors firing twice, and they pulled their weight in that sort of game. I had my eliminators kill 2 of the chicken walkers that were in a unit, which was fantastic. With actual suppressive fire from my suppressors that were able to take that out. My eradicators took down the plane as they were the only target. My multi-melters finished off a couple of dogs that were in range, and then I advanced my other 10-man intercessor advanced into the center of the board where he put his dogs. Now the opponent I was playing was very kind. I only moved him 6. He said, is your intention to charge the dogs? I said yes. He said, I have a stratagem that allows me to just fall back 12 inches when you declare them as a charge. At this point, I still wasn't on the centre objective, and it was direct assault that I'd taken on Surround and Destroy, which is the one with was it Overrun? No. So it's sweep and clear. So we had the 5 objectives, 1 in the centre, and I was like, okay, thanks very much for that. I'll advance them. I'll put my troops onto the objective in the middle. I would declare a charge with another unit that I had brought up, my lieutenant. He went, no worries. He fell back. I was able to get direct assault. It did mean that my intercessors didn't really have a lot to shoot at, but they are assault weapons with the assault bolter, so I was able to pop a couple of the dogs off, vanguards, and one of his, plasma servitor type thingy my bombs. I did really well in my opinion. I hit back as hard as he hit me, but going first always means that if you can only hit as hard, you're always still going to be down, due to the fact that he's going to hit just as hard in the second turn with his planes coming back on, and his chicken walkers now being in a position where he can now target my contemptors and on all my other units. So turn 2, he then goes, I set off, of course, I used a stratagem, the Imperial Fist one, which, while my intercessors were on the centre objective, giving him a +1 armour save, which hugely made a difference. I was surprised. He fired his big squad of, I think it was 18 left, of vanguards into them, and they survived. He only killed 4.5 of them, with like another 60 odd shots with stratagems and buffs and stacks, and then of course he fired other bits and pieces into them and charged them, and I was left with 1 intercessor at the end of the battle round. But having 70 odd shots coming to you from the vanguard units and surviving due to the +1 and feel no pain from pain is a lesson, keeping those guys alive was huge. It meant that he still was able to take them down and take the centre objective, but his resources he had to put into him meant that the rest of my army didn't suffer as bad, which I was quite happy with. I was able to return fire with the 2 contemptors into the 18-man unit that was left and wipe those, so all of his Sakatari units were pretty much gone, so there was no more worrying about the unit being buffed like 6 times. His other chicken walkers were killed by one of the other contemptors I had, and my eliminators and suppressors that I had left. I was starting to run out of a lot of my units at this point. My attack bikes had now been killed. I had 1 suppressor left. I had 3 of my intercessors left. My assault intercessor had made an advance onto an objective on one side to be able to get me 10 points for primary, followed with my eliminators, and I had virtually in turn 3 a lieutenant, an ancient, 2 Contemptors and my HQ elements, and that was pretty much it. So it was sliding further and further away from me. You know, I just kept having to push for the centre objective with direct assault. I made a crucial charge with my chapter master and killed a data master or some sort of archaeologist or something like that. So I was quite pleased with that. And the game finished at 76 to me, 95 to the Admech player. He played extremely well. At the end of the game, we shook hands, and it was a very, if I hadn't got first turn, he said that my army would have absolutely destroyed his, he said. But not that I've designed my army to go first. I've tried to design it where it can survive turn 1 and still be very effective on the return. And that goes to show within the Admech game that we played, I did survive turn 1, and I was able to inflict enough damage to put the Admech player on his heels. But once he realises, he advanced a lot of his units to make up the ground that he'd lost from the firing that he'd taken, and due to the fact that I couldn't swing another unit in from a sideboard because I hadn't put him in reserve or deep strike, meant that he could hide minuscule units, so just a marshal on the back lines, and secure those objectives in his own deployment zone and behind certain buildings where he wasn't worried about having to leave a character on their own, which is a fantastic sort of opponent to go up against. It really does show that the caliber of palette players that we were in that pod were fantastic. I had a great fun. I came 16 out of 30 again. I was the top player who had won 1 game out of the whole tournament. So I would have liked to have won 2, but I've gone further than the last one. I was second who won 1 game in the last tournament. I'm now on top of 1 game. So you never know, I might win 2 games and be bottom of the people who win 2 games next time. That's the sort of projection that I'd like to see. We're going up. One thing I would say, I'd probably go and change now. I'm looking, I don't have enough counter I don't have enough pressure. I don't put enough pressure on if I don't go first. So I'm considering dropping 1 more attack bike, dropping my eliminators and a suppressor unit, and put in an Invictus warsuit in there, so I can then deploy 9 inches away, have this massive threat that if they don't deal with, that he's going to come in with, and just try and put a little bit more, because no one thinks eliminators are a threat, so they don't take any firepower on turn 1, which is fine because it means I can hit back pretty hard with them. But it means that the rest of my army is taking the punch, where if I can put an Invictus, in my own mind, this is my sort of logic, if I can put an Invictus warsuit on the board, have it deploy in the middle of the board, if I'm taking over moments, they have to deal with it. Otherwise, in the end of my turn, I am just going to score 2 points there, which means that the rest of the army can move up then and maneuver into positions where I can actually take the centre of the board turn 2, turn 3, because that's where I struggle with turn 1, taking the centre of board. But the Invictus might just give me that element where I can do that. Now, of course, that is dependent on army. Your game plan changes depending on who you're against. But I'm hoping with the Invictus warsuit that I just am able to put a bit more of a threat within the centre of the board that they have to deal with, and enabling my backline units or my backline army to not stand as much of the weathering of the firepower of the enemy, because they want, of course, deal with the Invictus. It's still going to have strength 7 weapons, so it means it will benefit from turn 1 with the auto cannon that I'll put on it instead. And it has a good punch in combat. As you can see, my army doesn't have very many units that do combat very well. So fingers crossed that the Invictus can do that for me. Looking back at the Admech game, it just means that if I have the Invictus, I could have put it on one of my flanks and just put it on an objective and just sit on an objective, which meant that I score primary more efficiently, and I don't have to try as hard to get to them, and that allows me to put more pressure on the opponent and not scoring the primary. That's the sort of idea. I hope you see that soon, and maybe I can put in some practice games and let you know how the Invictus Warsuit's playing against certain armies. I've got a couple of games lined up with friends, and I'm hoping to record a battle report soon to get it up online onto the Across the Tabletop. I currently don't have any more RTT set up or tournaments until September now for the London GT. I am looking for a tournament in August to go to, so fingers crossed there is a game that I can actually arrange for an RTT or a 2-day event GT in the UK. That's nearby, near Oxford, because of course that's the difficult part. I don't want you're going to be travelling 2 hours, 3 hours for a game for a 2-day event, but I'm hoping that will be something that is achievable in August. And of course I've got my shed being built in August as well, so fingers crossed that everything goes well. There is a little news to be made through my community, through the club that I play with. We've just bought tickets for the London team tournament in Northampton for February 2022, and we're just putting a team together. So you might see, or you will see for definite, you will see the team getting together. We're going to, once the shed's built, of course, we're going to try and make that our HQ and put in as many games as possible as a team, play as many different armies as possible, get as many of the games setted out. No one's put any armies down as what they want to play just yet, as it's still fresh. We only bought the tickets in the last week, Monday I think it was, or Saturday they went live, so we've only just bought the tickets. Friday they went live, but we're still going to plan that out, so this will be a nice interesting watch to see a team put together. We've got great talent within the team and some great players. You've met some of them. Charlie and Nick and Rich are 3, and we'll be bringing in a friend of mine that plays Thousand Suns, and he hasn't played many games in 9th, but with the Thousand Suns Codex coming out, we're hoping that he will jump on the bandwagon and jump with us and put headlong into taking a team to the team tournament in Northampton. So look out for that, and more information will follow from that. Thank you for tuning in. It's a bit long. I know most of you probably tuned out by now. My monotone voices, of course, and the prolong just on and on and on. Click like, share, join us again. Put in the comments what you think about the army, what I should change. If you've got any ideas of what's been working in your games. I know there's a guy in America called Grant that's part of the Facebook channel that swears by the drop pod and the 2 Devastator units that come in again. That's what I'm trying to work out, the best way to get that effective fire support at a different angle from deployment zone. I think he's probably right. I think the drop pod with 2 Devastator units inside are probably more efficient in all cases, but that takes away from what I'm trying to achieve, which is a more mobile army. So we'll see. Thanks for checking out, and stay tuned for more. Take care.